invite Ms. Betty Boothroyd, Member of Parliament of the House of Commons, to deliver a speech. I'd like to introduce Ms. Betty Boothroyd to the expatriate community as one of the MPs of West Bromwich. She is the Vice President of the Anglo-Sri Lankan Parliamentary Group, and also she has visited Sri Lanka on numerous occasions and has defended the good name of Sri Lanka at various occasions. Let us welcome
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, it's a very great pleasure for me to be here today and to share this platform with such distinguished people. Whenever I have been in Colombo, both the Minister for National Security and the Leader of the Opposition have been both generous and tolerant in giving me very much of their valuable time. And I am honored in being asked to join with them and with you today. All three of us we belong to different political parties, but even so, we've got very much in common. Both Lalit and Anura were educated here in the UK, as indeed I was myself, albeit they had the privilege of a British university education, while I left school at the age of 16. For all that, we have, the three of us, grown together, sharing common bonds, the respect for the rule of law, and a deep and abiding commitment to parliamentary democracy, and the desire, most of all, to achieve a just and lasting peace for all the peoples of Sri Lanka. I share that desire too, not least because I have come to regard Sri Lanka as my second home. You know, Mr. President, it's more than 10 years ago since I first saw Sri Lanka. And I never believed in love at first sight. But it hit me very hard because it happened to me at that time. And, you know, over the years I've grown in the knowledge of the country and its peoples. And I've made lasting relationships in all the ethnic communities. My initial emotions, I believe, have been matched with the warmth of friendship and the generous affection by many people there at all levels of society. But you know, even the closest relationships and the devotion and all the affection that we feel for each other doesn't go unquestioned. Not long ago, along with some of my parliamentary colleagues, we accepted an invitation to make an official visit. And that visit was stimulated by the communal violence of the summer of 1983 and the subsequent internal terrorism and the violations there. And during that visit, we met with ministers, with members of parliament, and with many other people in a variety of organizations. And we met too with the TULF leadership. We expressed our doubts to all of them, irrespective of rank or position. We put our views very forcibly to the President himself, and we put them very forcibly indeed to a press conference, and we made suggestions for change, and some of those changes were carried out. On our return, we published a pamphlet sustaining our criticism of what we considered to be unacceptable activities on the part of the security forces and the manner in which some aspects of legislation were not open to parliamentary scrutiny, while there other aspects of it were open to extreme abuse. And we pressed for repeal of some of those areas of legislation or for amendment. And we stated the case for a political solution involving realistic devolution of power. Friendship and affection should never debar rational argument in democracies, and nor should it allow for rosy paintings when rosy pictures there may not be. Rancor and animosity are not part of the scene when friends argue and debate in mutual respect and in common commitment, and that is what we all share here today. Mr. President, that commitment of my country to the progress and well-being of the Sri Lankan people has existed over very many years. A manifestation of that commitment, I think, lies in the development of the Madawela scheme. And I was proud to be a member of the British government, which acknowledged the potential and saw to it that that potential was developed. And from the early beginnings and on each visit I made, I never ceased to be inspired as that great engineering majesty grew in strength. And in April of this year, at the inauguration of the Victoria Dam, your government invited me back. Victoria Project is the heart of the great Madawela scheme. And I tell you, nobody there stood taller than me. Nobody felt more humble at the same time in the knowledge that precious water would make acres of dry, parched land productive, that people would eat better, that they would drink clean water, that hydroelectricity, so vital for economic development, would be generated, and that the quality of life will be sustained and advanced for thousands of your people now and for generations to follow. And that scheme, I believe, is a lasting testimony to international cooperation and development. Unhappily, that development takes place against the menace of terrorism and the challenge to a sovereign state. This morning I was as distressed as anyone to hear in the early news that the talks had broken down. I hope and I pray that it is no more than a hiccup, because it is decision time for Sri Lanka as it makes further attempts towards a political solution. And I say, Mr. President, it is not a time for scoring party political points, but conciliation from all sides is imperative. What takes place in the coming weeks will be largely determined by your government's ability to satisfy the Tamils on the issue of autonomy, the degree of power in local administration, the recruitment, the positioning of a police, and perhaps most important of all, the provisions for land settlement and for land use. But for their part, the Tamil leadership must demonstrate a genuine desire for settlement, and that desire must be free from international influences. And they must show their undoubted energies and talent in obtaining a realistic and a fair deal for those they represent. The solution to complex problems between communities can only be achieved through consultation, negotiation. And when decisions are arrived at, they have to be supported and upheld not by the force of arms, but by the force of law. Peace and security. Peace and security cannot be bought at the end of a gun. Bear with me, Mr. President, while I make a point about propaganda, because if historical problems which have climaxed in recent times were not sufficient for you to deal with, you are faced with a formidable propaganda challenge which preys on the credulity of non-governmental groups and organizations who are known and prone to react predictably to stories of atrocities perpetrated by the majority against a minority. Newspapers, ladies and gentlemen, thrive on it. It makes good copy. And we are led to believe that the practices of tolerance is the monopoly of only one section of the community. On Friday, I heard what I thought to be the most irresponsible report that I've heard coming out of Colombo on the 6 o'clock BBC News. That correspondent reported on an outbreak of violence by guerrilla forces, and everything he had to say was hedged in every sentence with caveats which said, "It is rumoured that," or "It is thought that," or "It is said that." No confirmation or source of the story was given. We were left with rumour, we were left with conjecture. And I recall, ladies and gentlemen, his final sentence in which he described security forces in civilian clothing going into the village and throwing more than 100 dead bodies of men, women and children into the back of their trucks and taking them away, so it is said. Said by whom? We don't know. We're not told. There was no verification whatsoever. The correspondent in question was disclaiming direct responsibility by his chosen caveats. It is the most irresponsible use of the media. Finally, Mr. President, allow me to make some comment on the events that have taken place in this country and should not go unnoticed or unchallenged. A few weeks ago, my government brought in new regulations requiring all Sri Lankans to obtain entry visas before coming to this country. It was unprecedented and is unprecedented action of a British government in relation to a Commonwealth country, and I deplore it. I spoke in the House of Commons debate on this matter, and my views are there for all to see in the Hansard in print. But that requirement is extended to Sri Lankans living in third countries, many of you who have come here this weekend, and wishing to visit us or to pass through the UK. And it is also extended to Sri Lankans with resident permanent status here. Those who live among us are required to obtain a re-entry visa before leaving this country. So if you live here and you wish to take your family on a day trip across the Channel to Boulogne, be sure you get a re-entry visa before you go and pay £10 for the privilege of returning and into the country in which you have made your home. During the recess, many of us, like myself, have been troubled to some extent by trying to help Sri Lankans visiting here or passing through who are held in detention at London Airport by these ridiculous new regulations. Canadian Sri Lankan coming in, the eldest son of a family, required to go to his father's funeral and light the pyre. After a long time and a lot of intervention, he was graciously allowed 4 days in this country to do all of that, to comfort his family and to make new arrangements. Young woman teaching up country in Nigeria came into London, was detained for over 48 hours until I was able to intervene. I don't know the girl, I've never seen her, I probably will never see her. She had with her a ticket taking her on to Colombo. And yet it was insisted that she'd had overnight here, she was going to be returned to Nigeria. You know, ladies and gentlemen, it is crazy. Of course our countries have to have some controls. The way this is being interpreted is quite nonsense. Where will it all end? I have made the strongest written representations to the Home Office, and I hope that others who are here today, I won't mention names, but just follow my eyes, will probably make those same representations. Mr. President, let me finally end, and I'm sorry to have taken so much time, let me finally end by thanking you very much for having me here today. As I say, what a pleasure it is to join a platform with old friends and to be able to talk in this manner. It is wonderful to live in a democracy. I wish your organization well. More importantly, my heart goes out to your country. I wish it well. I shall be there very soon indeed. And I hope that the talks are really no more, the breakdown is no more than a hiccup, and that it will be success and progress for all of Sri Lanka in the years ahead. Thank you.